My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 58 years old, and I live in a small house on the edge of Denver, Colorado. The same house where I raised my only daughter, alone, after her mother passed away when she was just 7. For 22 years, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts at the auto plant so she could have piano lessons, new shoes every fall, and a warm dinner every night. I never remarried. I never needed to. She was my whole world. So when my daughter Emily called me 2 months ago and said the words, "Dad, I'm getting married," I cried right there on the phone. I thought that was the happiest day of my life. I didn't know yet that in a few weeks, I would find out I was paying for a wedding that I wasn't invited to. If you had told me that morning, as I hung up the phone smiling ear to ear, that my own daughter would try to erase me from her life, I would have called you a liar. But this is exactly what happened. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why silence can be the loudest kind of justice. Emily was 26, working as a marketing coordinator downtown, and she had been dating a man named Trevor Whitfield for almost 2 years. Trevor came from money, big house in the hills, parents who vacationed in Europe every summer, a family name people in town seemed to recognize. The first time I met him, he shook my hand a little too firmly, like he was trying to prove something. "Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Callahan," he said, glancing around my modest living room. "Emily's told me a lot about you." Something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Emily looked happy. That's all that mattered to me. When they got engaged, Emily came over with the ring on her finger, glowing with excitement. "Dad, we want you involved in everything," she told me. "You're going to help me plan this wedding, right?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "Whatever you need." I meant every word of that. I didn't know yet how those words would be used against me. The first red flag came a week later. Emily called and asked, gently, carefully, if I could help cover some of the wedding costs, the venue deposit, the catering, even part of her dress. "Trevor's family offered to pay for a lot of it," she said, "but I want this to feel like it's from you too, Dad. Is that okay?" Of course it was okay. I would have sold my truck if she asked me to. I transferred the first payment that same night, $8,000, without a second thought. But then something strange started happening. Every time I asked about the wedding details, the date, the guest list, the seating, Emily would change the subject. "We're still figuring things out," she'd say. Or, "Trevor's mom is handling that part." A month before the wedding, I asked her directly, "Where do you want me sitting during the ceremony? Front row, I assume, next to Aunt Carol?" There was a pause on the phone, a pause that lasted just a little too long. "We'll figure out seating later, Dad," she said quickly. "Don't worry about it." I told myself it was just wedding stress. I told myself I was imagining things. I was wrong. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my sister, Carol. "Richard," she said, her voice careful, "did Emily send you an invitation yet?" "An invitation? Carol, I'm her father. I don't need an invitation." There was silence on the line. Then she said the words that changed everything. "I got mine in the mail yesterday. Your name wasn't on the guest list I saw when I called the venue to confirm my seat." My hands went cold. I told her there must be some mistake. I hung up and called Emily immediately. She didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, 3 hours later, she texted me back. "Dad, we need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow?" That night was the longest night of my life. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the wedding fund folder on my table, the folder with every receipt, every transfer, every dollar I had quietly sent toward my daughter's wedding. $18,000 in total by that point, for a wedding I apparently wasn't invited to. The next morning, Emily sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I used to help her with homework. She couldn't look me in the eye. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "Trevor's family. They think it would be better if you weren't at the ceremony. They said your presence might make things complicated for the family photos. They didn't think it would look right, with you not having the same kind of background as them." I felt something break inside my chest. 22 years of sacrifice reduced to a sentence about how I wouldn't look right in photographs. "So I'm good enough to pay for the wedding," I said quietly, "but not good enough to sit in it." Emily started crying. "It's not me, Dad. It's them, I swear. I tried to fight for you." But you didn't fight hard enough, I said. Did you? She had no answer. And in that silence, I understood everything. She had chosen comfort over courage. She had chosen Trevor's family name over her own father's love. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of her. I simply nodded, stood up, and said the words that would echo through the rest of this story. Then I suppose I have some decisions to make too. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old laptop and looked through every financial record connected to that wedding. That's when I discovered something Emily never told me. Something far bigger than a seating arrangement. The venue Emily and Trevor had chosen, a beautiful vineyard estate outside the city, wasn't just some rental property. It was owned by a holding company. And when I searched that company's name out of pure curiosity, I found out it belonged to me. Not directly, but through an old investment I had made 15 years ago, back when I quietly put money into a group of local properties through a business partner named Frank. Frank had passed away 2 years earlier, and in his will, he had transferred his shares of that investment group to me, something I had frankly forgotten about, buried in paperwork I never had time to review. I owned 28% of the very vineyard where my daughter planned to marry a man whose family thought I wouldn't look right in photographs. I sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at the screen, and for the first time since Emily's phone call, I smiled. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I want to be clear about something. This was never about revenge for the sake of cruelty. This was about my daughter finally seeing the truth about the people she was about to spend her life with, and about a father refusing to disappear quietly. I called my lawyer, an old friend named Gerald, the next morning. Gerald, I said, I need you to confirm something for me, and then I need your help with a plan. Gerald confirmed it within the hour. I did, in fact, legally hold a significant ownership stake in the vineyard estate. Enough that, as a part owner, I had every right to be present at any event held there, and enough influence that certain arrangements could be made, quietly, through proper channels. I didn't want to cancel the wedding. I didn't want to hurt Emily. I wanted Trevor's family, the same family who thought my presence would complicate their photographs, to understand exactly whose land they were standing on. So I made one phone call to the estate's general manager, a woman named Diane, who I had met years earlier through Frank. Diane, I said, I'd like to remind you of the ownership terms on file, and I'd like to make a small, quiet addition to an upcoming event on your calendar. She listened, and she agreed. In the 2 weeks that followed, I said nothing to Emily. I let her believe I had accepted being excluded. I even sent her a text. I understand, sweetheart. I just want you to be happy. But behind the scenes, I was preparing something else entirely. I asked Diane to add exactly one name back onto the official property access list for the day of the wedding, my own, under my legal rights as a partial owner of the estate, not as a guest, not as someone sneaking in through a side door, as a man standing on land that was partially his. I also asked Gerald to prepare a simple document, nothing dramatic, nothing designed to destroy anyone, just a formal, polite letter clarifying the ownership structure of the venue, in case anyone at the event questioned why I was there. I bought a suit, a good one, not to show off, but because for the first time in weeks, I wanted to walk in somewhere with my head held high, exactly as myself. The night before the wedding, I sat in my kitchen one more time, looking at an old photo of Emily as a little girl, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. I whispered to that photo, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this so you finally see clearly. The day of the wedding, the vineyard was breathtaking. String lights, white flowers, nearly 200 guests in their finest clothes. Trevor's family sat proudly in the front rows, greeting guests like royalty. I walked in through the front entrance, not the side. Diane greeted me warmly at the door, exactly as arranged, and walked me personally to a seat near the front, the seat Emily had once promised me months earlier, before everything changed. A ripple of confused whispers spread through the crowd. Trevor's mother turned pale. Trevor himself stood up halfway from his seat before catching himself. Emily, standing at the altar in her wedding dress, froze the moment she saw me. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of shock. Trevor's father approached me quietly during the confusion. Sir, I think there's been some kind of mistake with the seating. No mistake, I said calmly, handing him the simple letter Gerald had prepared. I'm a part owner of this estate. I have every right to be here today. I simply wanted to see my daughter get married, from a seat that belongs to me, on land that partially belongs to me too. The color drained from his face as he read the letter. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Emily walked down the aisle not toward Trevor first, but toward me. She knelt beside my seat, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you from the very beginning. You were never the problem. I was." I took her hand gently. "I'm not here to ruin your day, sweetheart. I'm here to remind you, and everyone in this room, that love without respect isn't love at all. You deserve people who see your father as a blessing, not an embarrassment." Trevor's family never fully recovered their composure that day, but more importantly, Emily never forgot that moment. 3 months later, she quietly ended her engagement to Trevor, telling me through tears, "I finally understood what you were trying to show me, Dad. I just wish I'd seen it sooner." I never wanted to be the villain of anyone's wedding story. I only wanted my daughter to understand a simple truth, that money can buy a venue, a dress, even a fairy tale afternoon. But it can never buy the quiet, steady love of a father who shows up, even when he's told he doesn't belong. If there's one thing I learned from that day, it's this. Silence is not the same as surrender. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is simply show up, stand tall, and let the truth speak for itself.